Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and today we've got a great one for you. We're hearing from Casey McCallister. Casey is just an all-around awesome guy. He actually helped me get started with this podcast. He was one of the first people to commit to recording. It obviously took us a little while to get our schedules together because he was very busy competing in the CrossFit Games. Then we, of course, had hunting season where he, I think, guides in Wyoming. He also goes down and hunts in Oklahoma. In general, Casey's just an awesome guy, and I can't thank him enough for coming on the podcast. So that being said, guys, I want to move something that I normally put at the end of the podcast to the front. I want you guys to please share the podcast. I'm trying to grow this thing, trying to make it more relevant, and of course, the more people that hear about it and hear the stories, the more people are going to reach out and want to tell their own stories. So if you could, share with one person today. That's all I'm asking for. So, all right, guys, that's it. Let's go ahead and kick this thing off and let Casey tell you his stories. All right, Casey, welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast, brother. How you doing?
Oh, man, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, man, I'm super excited that you're here. I think that when I had the idea for this podcast, you were maybe like the third person that I told about it. So I was like, you couldn't have been more supportive. So I want to say thank you. I think you're going to be like episode 31. So obviously it's kind of taken off and I'm having a ton of fun with it. So I want to say thank you to you for one, just, inspiring me and firing me up to get this thing going. And then two, for coming on to tell some stories, because it's been tough to get us both here so that we can hear some of these stories.
We've had some challenges getting our schedules lined up, but here we are. Man,
Yeah.
31 already. That's awesome, man. Golly.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and that's what's funny about that is I've actually lost 2 or 3 episodes just because of me being an idiot, software issues, whatever. So it should be like 35, but whatever. We'll get there.
That's really cool to see it kind of like not only, get going, but then take off. Yeah, I remember you telling me the idea and it was like, man, what a great way to use, modern day technology to kind of share those stories that everybody loves sharing just around the campfire and, BSing it at your camp or whatever. So that's
for sure, man. And I think I told you this a long time ago, but it's become even more and more true, which is like no one that I have asked has said everybody wants to tell their stories, whether they're, whatever kind of social media influencer you want to say that they are or aren't, or just the average Joe. Everybody's like, oh man, yeah, I'd love to. Or like, I'm not even sure if my stories are good enough, but then they get in and they're always good enough. So it's been fun. We're getting off track. Let's start this thing off, man, by introducing yourself. Let's let the listeners know who they're hearing some stories from.
Yeah, man, my name's Casey McCallister. I originally from Oklahoma, born and raised there. About 4.5 years ago, I moved out to Colorado to open a gym. I was a police officer before I was a gym owner. So just kind of, I don't know, that's like the 2-second version, but growing up in Oklahoma, I was really fortunate. I got into hunting at a really, really young age. My dad fell in love with hunting because of his father-in-law. So my grandfather, my dad didn't really grow up hunting that much. But his grandpa on his side did some hunting, but it was like not very successful hunting.
Sounds like my style of hunting.
And so then my mom and dad, they get married, and my dad falls in line with my mom's side of the family. My mom didn't hunt or anything, but her dad, my grandpa on that side of the family, hunted a lot and stuff. So my dad kind of got into it with his father-in-law and brother-in-law, so my uncle, and then it became, part of who he was. So I remember growing up and my dad would always go hunting, and I'm very fortunate that my dad's one of my heroes. So I wanted to be like dad, and so I remember I think it was 2nd grade. For some reason, I opened up one of my drawers and I found a pair of camo pants. My dad was a firefighter, so he was at the fire station that night, and he used to call every night, like at 10 o'clock every night. And so whenever he called that night, I like ran into the kitchen and was like, "Mom, tell Dad I want to go hunting." And she's like, "What?" And I'm like, "I found these camo pants. I want to go hunting with Dad." Like, all right, we'll go hunting, man. And it was right around turkey season. So right after that, like shortly after that, I think maybe 2 or 3 weeks, we went turkey hunting for the first time. And oh man, that was a fun trip. We got into some turkeys, and they just switched the rules where you had to he had to use steel shot for some reason. I don't know. There's something he blames it on the ammo to this day, but
Of course he does.
yeah, he did not connect. He fired off a couple rounds, and I was all excited, and then got up, and all the turkey were gone, and there was no dead ones, and I was like, "What the heck, Dad?" But that was my like intro to hunting. Whenever I was very, very young, so I was really fortunate to start whenever I was really young.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. And I don't want to steal any of your stories if this is one of the stories that you planned on telling, but wasn't your grandma like a crack shot or something? Like, wasn't she like an Olympic shooter of some kind?
Yeah, so like archery is big in my family. So my grandma and grandpa used to do something together all the time. Like whether it was playing tennis, they played tennis for a while, they played golf whenever in their older years, and for a while there they would go fishing together, and then for several years they shot archery together. And my actually I have a pretty cool picture up on the wall right here of them. But they used to shoot like trick shots and stuff this is like recurve days, before like
Yeah.
and and so then they started getting into competitions and everything. And yeah, my grandma and grandpa both shot the Olympic trials, and I don't remember where it was at and stuff like that. But I know my grandpa like qualified for the Olympic trials, and he kind of held his own. He was pretty solid. But my grandma, the story goes, she was like in contention to qualify for the Olympic team and all that stuff. And with like a round or so left or something like that, one of the guys comes over and says, "Hey, can you travel over to like Germany or something for however many months to train and compete in the Olympics?" And my grandma was like, "No, I got 3 kids. There's no way." And so she like threw it, but I'm sure she just got beat. But nonetheless, she was like in contention to qualify for the Olympic recurve team back. I don't know what year it was, but yeah, it's actually right here on the wall. It's a cool picture of them. It's old black and white photo, and they're both my grandma was left-handed, so my grandpa's at full draw with his right hand, and then they're like facing each other, and my grandma's left-handed, and so I don't know, it's kind of cool, and it's just cool seeing like some of their techniques and stuff. I see in how I was raised to shoot. So very fortunate. I love archery. I mean, archery is like my favorite
Yeah.
kind of hunting. But I'm very fortunate that my grandpa and grandma being so talented at it that whenever I learned to shoot, I got a bow whenever I was in 7th grade. Yeah, so I was like 13 or so. I got a compound, and my dad was like, "Hey, I'm not going to tell you anything on how to shoot. We're going to go over to, I call him Paul. You're going to go over to Paul's, and Paul is going to teach you how to shoot." So like from day one, I didn't have any bad habits or anything like that. So I was super fortunate
Good for
that,
you, man.
yeah, I learned correctly. And, but that doesn't mean I haven't missed my fair share of deer.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm not the same where I just had like an Olympic qualifier teaching me from the get-go, but I started archery when I knew about some of the best teachers out there, and with social media and all these things like Joel Turner. I don't know if you're familiar with Joel and Shot IQ and like Trigger Panic and all that. So like I don't think I even shot a bow, and I was already aware of Trigger Panic. So hopefully I don't have too many bad habits. We've shot together, and you didn't seem to complain too much about my shooting.
Well, I definitely don't try to boss people around. That's for sure. I'll give you my 2 cents if you ask for it. But other than that, I'm not good enough to try to tell other people what to do.
Yeah, cool, man. Cool. One other thing, I know I thanked you for a couple things earlier. I also want to thank you. So our relationship is you own the gym that I started going to when I was like, you know what? I'm fat. I need to get in shape for hunting. And so I also want to thank you for getting me in the best shape I've ever been in for hunting. Never mind the injury of me falling and hurting my back, but I felt awesome that one day that I got out there. So I was feeling really strong. So thank you for the coaching that you did. I also want to, give you some of your accolades. You are, I don't know the year, but you were the fittest cop in America at one point. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah, 2016 and 2017. So
yeah. So I just want the listeners to know that we're talking to a real stud here. That's just leveling the playing field here, letting everyone know who we're talking to. But yeah, man, let's kick it off. I know you got some stories in mind. Why don't you set the stage?
Well, since we're talking about, trying to talk me up a little bit, let's bring me back down a little bit. So,
Perfect.
The first deer I ever shot at, man. So I was, like I said, I love archery hunting, and that's how I started. I never went rifle hunting until I had already harvested a deer with my bow. And so I was 7th grade. I got my first bow, and That was like in the spring. So my first hunting season was that later that year. So I was 8th grade, and we had a really cool place to hunt in Oklahoma City. It was like in the city where from some of our tree stands, you could actually see downtown Oklahoma City, like the skyline and everything.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's crazy. But with that, it was archery only. So it was kind of nice. Like I didn't have the option to rifle hunt at that location. So, but like I said, I was really fortunate getting coached by my grandpa and stuff on how to shoot. And I remember I could barely pull the 40 pounds minimum, but we would shoot out to 60 yards, like paper plates, like, have 8-inch group at like 60 yards. So I was very confident I could shoot a deer if it walked by. And finally, the rut kicks off. My dad was like, "Hey, if you don't want to go to school today, you don't have to go." I was like, "Sweet." So we skipped school, go hunting, and I'm sitting up in this huge cedar tree in a tree stand, and this doe walks. She's at like 40 yards, and she's walking towards me, and she gets like 30. She gets like 25. So I come to full draw, and she stops at 20 yards, broadside, like wide open, and her head was down, and like to the left of her was this steel post about 6 inches. So her like the
like 6 inches like behind her, or like
even worse than that. So the deer standing there profile, her head is to the left, and to the left of her head, about a foot or so, is this 6-inch steel pipe. So her vitals are like 5 foot, maybe 4 foot to the right, because her head's down, and I'm shaking like a leaf on a tree, and I'm at full draw, and I'm like, I don't know what happened. I don't even know how, but I ended up shooting that metal post with my first shot. I center punched that post, and then it gets worse. So since she had no idea where it came from, she just hears the big noise. Boom. Well, she runs right under my stand and stops 10 yards on the other side of me and is blowing at that post because she thinks like something, I don't know. She had no idea it was me. She thought it was the post. Well, then I'm shaking so bad. I've got buck fever. I haven't even hit anything. And I'm trying to grab another arrow out, and she finally slowly walks away. And oh my gosh. And I had to tell somebody. So I had to tell my dad, well, I got a shot. And he's like, well, what happened? And I told him, and he just laughed his butt off, man. So, but that was my first experience of actually coming to full draw and taking a shot. And man,
that's amazing.
It was pretty bad. It was pretty, I thought I was pretty hot shit till that day. So
how far back from the vitals was that bull? 5 feet, you say?
Yeah. I mean, at least 4, like it was like way off. So yeah,
that's funny, man. That reminds me of a story. I'm gonna tell you one. I went hunting in Texas, so I have some relatives. They have a small plot of land. Maybe it's not small; it's 50 acres, but really not much of it is huntable. It's just completely thorns, like you can't even walk through the brush. But there's a little field. So my buddy and I go out there, and we set up for a few days, and they want us to kill some hogs. We don't see any hogs, but we do see on our last sit of the entire hunt, we see some does. And so at the time, I have my father-in-law's AR-15. He bought, before COVID, like just thousands and thousands of rounds online. I don't know where he got this stuff from. So I've got his AR. I've got some of that ammo. My buddy doesn't even have a rifle. I don't know why he doesn't have a rifle, but I brought my 270 as well as my brother-in-law's 270. So I've got an arsenal with me, and I'm like, here, take this 270, shoot with that, and it's my brother-in-law's 270. So these two does walk out, and we're sitting maybe 100 yards apart. And these does walk out in front of me at maybe 15 yards. and so like I've got a laser sight on this AR because I was intending on shooting hogs. So I wanted to be able to shoot a little bit quicker. So I pull it up, nothing, just nothing. And I'm like, what the heck? So I, pull the whole magazine out, empty the chamber, put the magazine back in, put one back in the chamber. The deers don't even care. They're just sitting there. They're maybe 17 yards now. So I click. Like, what the heck is going on? So I don't know if it's a firing pin. I don't know if it's the ammo, but I'm sitting here just like fiddling with the gun, making a ton of noise. And the deer are like, well, we couldn't care at all. So they walk, they go behind these trees, so I can't see them. But I know that like where my buddy is, they're just going right into his line of sight. And so I'm sitting here still fiddling with the gun. Boom, I hear the 270 go off, and it scares the crap out of me. Just because I'm so into the AR at the time. I'm like, why isn't this thing working? Why can't I get a shot out? So my buddy's like, he fires, the deer run off, and we're like, all right, we just got a deer down. This is great. So we're and it's right as the sun's going down. So we got our headlamps out. We're kicking leaves around where we can't find any blood. All right, well, we can't see anything. Let's come back in the morning and try and find something here. We'll figure it out. So we come back in the morning and there's nothing, not even a drop, nothing. And we're talking like 80 yards with a 9-powered 270. Like there's no reason he should be missing this shot. And we can't find anything. We look for hours. We're crawling through thorns. It's just awful. It's just like the most miserable time. And so finally he's like, well, I must have just, I was like, I think you missed it. He's like, I couldn't possibly miss it. How would I miss it? It was that close. And what we end up doing is take my 270 because I'm like, that AR is going back in the truck. I'm not bringing that thing back out. So I get my 270. We set up a little shooting range and I shoot like a hot pad, like to keep your fingers warm, one of those things. And I shoot it at 100 yards with my rifle. I'm like, okay, my rifle's good. And I'm not a terrible shot. So let me shoot yours. So I take what is my brother-in-law's rifle, the one that he was using, and I shoot it and I miss the tree entirely. And I'm like, oh, okay. And like I'd used that gun maybe a season earlier and it was dead on. So I don't know what happened. That gun did nothing but sit in the safe. But at some point, that rifle got off enough that we did like, some bush math where we were like, okay, this far off at this point, that how far the deer was. Yeah, you probably missed by 3-4 feet.
Oh my gosh.
So we tell that story to each other often as the luckiest deer that have ever been in Texas, because I took 3 shots at the one and then he actually fired a round and still missed it. And those deers got away. So, but it reminded me because he missed 4 feet to the rear of a deer. So your story just reminded me.
At least his wasn't quite 20 yards, I guess. But did you find out? Find out what happened with the AR? What was going on with that? Was it the ammo?
I took it to my father-in-law and I was like, I don't know what happened. I don't know if you've ever shot this gun before, which I don't know if he has. And I was like, but it clicked. I don't know if the firing pin's not there or the ammo's busted. I don't know. But it was in Texas and I live in Colorado, still live in Colorado, moving to Texas. But I was like, I don't have time to figure this out. So I'm going to tell you what my issue was. And he just hasn't tested it. So,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've mentioned it in the podcast before, but he has cancer. And so it's very far down on his list is figuring out what was wrong with that.
Yeah, totally. That's understandable for sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm going to go back down there soon. So maybe I'll try and figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I got to, God. Yeah. That would be something that would haunt me a little bit. Like, oh man, why isn't this going off? But yeah, who knows? Yeah. Something similar. Yeah. It was crazy.
I mean, I had his AR because he's just one of those guys. It's got the red dot sight. It also has a laser. So I had the laser on the side of the deer. Like there's no missing if it just fired around. And I tried everything I possibly could think of to get that thing to go off, but no luck. So the luckiest deer in Texas, at least that season.
Well, they always say you remember all the deer that you miss. You don't remember necessarily all the ones you actually connect on. But
that's coming from a hunter who's hunted a lot longer than I have. Because I remember all of the ones I've killed and haven't killed. So
yeah, dude, I'm so lucky. I remember the first deer hunt I ever went on with my dad. I don't know how old I was, but it must have been after 2nd grade because turkey hunting was the first time I went hunting was 2nd grade with my dad. But we went deer hunting together and we're in a tree stand. I wasn't actually hunting. I was just tagging along. I wasn't actually hunting, but hanging out with dad, making memories. And we're sitting in a 2-man. And by the way, Oklahoma hunting is so much different than Colorado hunting. Oh my God. I thought I was a hunter until I moved out here to Colorado. Oh my gosh. Backcountry hunting is just so different. So I started, so my dad and I are sitting up at a tree stand and here comes some does down. It's rifle season. And my dad said something. He was sitting next to me. My dad said something. So I turned and he's like, don't move. And I was turned, facing my dad. And so my shoulder was like a perfect, bipod for him. So he puts, I'm facing him. It's like the most redneck thing ever. I'm facing him and I'm like making eye contact with him. And he puts that rifle on my shoulder and he uses it as a monopod or bipod. And he freaking shoots this doe. And to this day, I have this picture. I was like the happiest freaking kid ever. There's a picture of me and my dad in the garage at my house. Cause I grew up in a neighborhood. I didn't grow up like on a farm or anything. So I grew up in a neighborhood. So my dad would always hang the deer from like the attic, entrance. And so It's me and my dad. I've got this huge, just shit-eating grin on my face. Doe hanging in the garage. And it looks, oh my God, it looks so like redneck, right? But I love
Yeah.
that because I'm just freaking having so much fun. And that day was like, man, I feel like I became a man that day because my dad
Yeah. Because
ear shooting off my shoulder. So.
that's amazing. Did you have like headphones or like earphones or something? Because the gun on your shoulder
No,
sounds
no.
so damn loud. Your ears are
Well,
probably still ringing.
the muzzle brake was like like past my shoulder, so it was like the
Okay,
stock of the gun was like on my shoulder.
gotcha.
It wasn't too bad, but no, it was, man. That was, I don't even remember what gun it was. I don't even remember what he was shooting. He shoots a 7 mag now, but I don't think it's a 7 mag. I don't know what it was, but
That's a
yeah,
pretty awesome story. I
yeah,
love it when people bring their like crazy dad stories.
I
This
got
is an episode that's lost, but like Biko Wright, who was on Alone, you know, the guy with the overall big beard. I had him on the podcast. I lost the whole episode, so I'm an idiot. But he had some amazing stories about his dad just doing crazy dad hunting stuff. And so I'm hoping to get him back on here soon to retell those stories because they were just too ridiculous. And I think
man.
those crazy dad stories are some of the best hunting stories.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm super fortunate that my dad and I, like, that's like one of the main reasons why I love hunting is because I'm just making memories with my dad. Like and whenever you ask about coming on, you start thinking about like, well, what would I even talk about? Like, what are stories that I would even tell? And like so many of my favorite memories of hunting always involve my dad. Like my dad,
Yeah.
he loves hunting, but he, as he's gotten older now, I don't know, he's in his like early 60s now, something like that. And he doesn't get around as well and stuff like that. But it's true that like he just likes making memories, kind of like what I do. It's just really cool
Yeah.
as you kind of appreciate that. One of my favorite stories is actually from last year. This deer over my left shoulder, this one right here, I killed last year on the day after Thanksgiving. And so in Oklahoma, you can kill two bucks. My dad had already killed 2 bucks. I think he killed like 5 or 6 deer last year. So he already killed his 2 bucks. So he was just doe hunting. So on Thanksgiving morning, I was like, hey, let's just sit in the blind together so we can sit there and BS. And if a doe walks out, you can shoot it. And then a buck walks out, well, I'll shoot. Well, so we're sitting there, and like right off in the morning, this doe walks out, and at like 30 yards, he's like, hey, you want to shoot her? I'm like, no. I'm like, I'll be buck hunting. He's like, well, I'm gonna shoot her. I'm like, okay, cool. So this is kind of cool. His grandpa, so my great grandpa, had handed down a rifle to my dad's uncle, and then that uncle passed away last year, so it got handed down to my dad. So my dad wanted to kill a deer with his grandpa's gun. So he's got this old 30 lever action, and he drops her, bam,
That's
right.
cool.
So that was kind of cool. We were all high-fiving, having a good time. Well, so the next day, so my dad, you can only kill one doe with your rifle, at least last year. And so he's done hunting. Well, so the day after Thanksgiving, we're sitting there and just BS. He whittles now, so he's sitting there whittling, and we're talking. And this doe, we're sitting in a ground blind. This doe walks out literally 3 yards from the front of the blind.
Of course.
Like looking in, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Well, then you look behind her, and this guy right behind me was chasing her, and he walks like 5 yards in front of it. Well, it's happening so fast, and I'm rifle hunting. It's happening so fast. And, in about 15 seconds, he stops about 30 yards away. I shoot him, he goes down, and we're high-fiving. And like, we went from sitting there BS and laughing to like killing a pretty nice buck. Well, I almost didn't mount him. I was like, man, I don't know. I mean, he's a good deer. He's a good 8-point, whatever, but like, I don't know. But man, just the stories and like the time spent in that blind, and like the joy that my dad and I both had. And like, he had that deer on trail camera, and he was like, oh my God, that's the big one that we've been chasing. And, he was excited. And so like, it is a nice deer, but it's more about like, man, now the rest of my life, I'll have that, and I'll be able to tell that story. And anybody that asks about it, I'll be able to like share that. Even if they don't ask about it, I'm going to tell them about it because how fired up my dad and I were. And yeah, super cool, man. Like I think that's the only deer I've ever killed where he's been next to me. I've turkey hunted a lot with him and stuff, but there was just, man, it was something special and something cool. And I can't wait, one day to hopefully get to do something like that with my own kids. And he's got a grandson who's he'll be 5 this year. So he's already talking to my sister like, hey, do you think he can go hunting, And my sister's like, maybe, yeah. So, but yeah, all the stories of hunting with my dad. I mean, pretty much all the ones that we'll ramble on about will probably have something to do with him, just because it's a huge part of. I mean, he's why I do it, So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, I'm super. I have a 3-year-old. He's nearly 4. He's coming up real quick. And I can't wait to get out there with him. I was thinking probably when he turns 5. And at the time, only thinking about Western big game. And I was like, well, antelope. I'll take him antelope or turkey. Because antelope, you're basically just driving in your truck trying to find antelope and hopefully not spooking them. So I was like, maybe he could tolerate that as a 5-year-old. So we'll see when we get him out there. But maybe now that I'm moving to Texas, I'll get him in a blind with me because he wants to go now. Like he's fired up. He's like, Dad, I'll go. And he grabs his little toy shotgun and he's like, let's go. And I'm like, I don't think you're patient enough or quiet enough for it to work right now, but we'll get there, buddy.
Yeah, that's the problem with my nephew is I don't know that I don't know that he's got the patience for it, but nonetheless, my dad's like, well, even if we can just go for like 30 minutes, it'll be good. So
yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Antelope, right? Because he'll be in the truck with my buddy, and he'll watch me, climbing through the desert or crawling through the desert, trying to, kill an antelope with a struggle stick. So I think that would be a good option for him, at least a good first one. And then if he has the patience to hang out in the car with Dad and his buddy all day, then maybe he's got the patience to sit in the blind or whatever the next steps would be. So
there you go.
But cool.
Something else cool about my dad is so like growing up, like I said, I grew up in a neighborhood. We don't have land or anything like that. But my dad, the way he interacts with people, I don't know if you've ever met him, but he's that parent that is just super supportive of his kids. It's like he'll still drive out to Colorado to like watch me do CrossFit and stuff like competitions, or he'll
That's
go.
Awesome.
Yeah, he'll go to Tennessee. Both my parents. Like I'm super fortunate; they're super supportive. But my dad is like, I don't know. He's got this way about him. He can just relate to people and talk to them. And I mean, if he doesn't like them, they'll also know that he doesn't like them. But he's just, I don't know, pretty down to earth. Well, so growing up, we always had connections on where to hunt, like because of these relationships he would build, like just organically. And then this person would have land, and they would say, "Yeah, come out and hunt." And he would definitely use me as a pawn too. He'd be like, "Oh, well, my son, really likes to hunt," So
Look at the poor children. Think of the children.
Yeah, exactly. But as I got a little bit older, we would he got this connection to this one place in a town called Sayre, Oklahoma. So I grew up like where the big tornadoes go through in Oklahoma, just south of the metro area. So Sayre is on like the borderline of like Oklahoma and Texas on the western edge. Okay. So it was like, I don't know, 2.5 hour drive. Well, I grew up where you wouldn't stay out overnight. You would drive to wherever you hunt, and then you drive back maybe in the middle of the day, and then the next day you do it again. Like you didn't go and camp and stuff like that. So because my dad was always working side job and stuff, so he'd have to get back and work. But anyway, so there's a place out in Sayre, and there's a guy. He actually didn't own the land, but his name was Alfred, and he was friends of friends that my dad knew. And so this guy, he lived out in Sayre, and he knew everybody, and he knew all the farmers, and he had permission to be on anybody's land out there. And so, and he could take whoever, just you had to be with Alfred. Well, Alfred was old whenever I knew him. That was a long time ago. He's got to be dead by now. I don't know. But so Alfred, he's a good old boy. So whenever he wouldn't take money, he would basically guide us. But let me tell you about the guiding. But he wouldn't take like money. You'd have to, buy him something. And he'd say, "Well, what do you want?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, I'll take some beer." And so my dad's like, "Well, what kind do you want?" And he's like, "I'll take Milwaukee's best." And my dad's like, "Well, I'll buy you the good stuff." He's like, "That is the good stuff." So Alfred would get us onto places. Well, so he would, he had permission on the gate, like the gates, knew all the codes and stuff. So he would drive us in. Well, one day it's dark out, we're going turkey hunting, and he had this old, just crappy truck. And so he's like, "All right, now as we get close to this gate, it's going to be downhill. I need you to get out and open that gate before I get to the bottom." Like, "What do you mean?" Like, "Well, my brakes don't work very good." So literally, like, we start rolling down this hill, and it's like, "All right, now's the time to get out." And I'm maybe like 14 at the time, but I'm faster than my dad. So it was my job. So I ran down, opened the gate, and then he's like pumping the brakes as he's going down because they don't work very good. And we get in there. And so anyway, so we get in there. Well, my dad had just dropped off or just gave him the case of beer, Milwaukee's Best. And so it was an old rusty truck. And so he parks next to this, this little a little silo. So my dad and I just walk over maybe, I don't know, 100 yards. Alfred's like, go over there by that log. The turkey will come out. This is a good spot. Okay, cool. Alfred knows it. So we go over there by his log and we're sitting there and it's dead calm, super calm morning. And you can hear the turkeys and everything. Well, the sun's just starting to come up. I mean, like it's prime time. And we hear, oh, those beer cans start opening. Alfred's sitting over there drinking his beer, and my dad and I are just laughing our butt off. And oh my gosh. And then about 15 minutes later, you hear another one. It was like clockwork. About every 15 minutes you hear, and he dang near had that whole case drank by the time we got done hunting that morning. But
that's a guide if I ever heard of one.
Yeah, right. My dad had connections like that all over. I don't know how he did it. He's still to this day where this one was killed. Where I have another one right here that I killed like 3 weeks ago. He blew glass up until like a year ago. And so this guy that he met through blowing glass owns land, and my dad's like talks to him. Now my dad will go out there and he'll work the land for him and stuff for free and stuff. But yeah, so my dad always had a way of finding places to hunt for us for sure.
That's awesome. That's a good skill to have.
Yeah. So I guess, so I've talked a little bit about turkey hunting. I've talked a little bit about deer hunting. I used to do a lot of waterfowl hunting growing up too. Used to love waterfowl. One story. So actually I told this story one time. I took a public speaking class and they said, all right, you can tell whatever story you want. I was like, well, I'll tell a funny hunting story. Right. So, and a lot of these stories don't have to do with actually killing anything. I noticed that it's mostly all the screw ups.
Yeah, that's fun. That's tends to be the case. Everybody's got that story where they don't do something.
Yeah. So me and I'll call him one of my friends. He was kind of like a family friend, but he and I. So back up a little bit. My uncle on my mom's side, he's got two sons. So my two cousins. So these three guys, my uncle and two cousins, they are like hunting machines. Like they are top dogs. And at this time they were like big into waterfowl hunting. And so, man, they were like gods to me. So, and they would invite me out to like, go with them on when I was out of school for a week or two. I'd go hunting with Kyle and Chad and Ricky, and they were just awesome duck hunters. So, well, this other friend that I'm talking about, he was the family friend. His name's Rigel. So he and I are like trying to figure out this waterfowl game. So any pond that we have access to, we're trying to, we have decoys, we have mojos, we can call okay and stuff. We're trying to figure it out, but we really don't know what the heck we're doing. So, but we start after a couple seasons, we start having a little bit of success. And well, then we get like the ultimate invite of, all right, hey, Kyle and Chad and Ricky, they have found a bunch of ducks on public land and they're going to invite anybody and everybody because it's a bunch of ducks and we need to freaking lay the smack down. So me and Rigel and then my uncle and cousins and then a couple other guys, there's like 6 or 8 of us. And so remember, like Rigel and I, we don't know what the heck we're doing. We're just trying to fit in. So yeah. Rigel doesn't even have waders. Well, somehow last minute, we got a pair of like old fishing waders. So they weren't insulated or anything. They're just old crappy. So it's a place called Fort Cobb, Oklahoma. It's pretty popular. So whenever the ducks are in, you gotta get out there. We got there at midnight to get our spot so nobody else would get there. So we got there at midnight and we start hiking in. Well, Rigel has these waders on. He's never used before. Well, and we got our decoys and it's about a mile hike in. So we're hiking in, with all of our stuff. And we all got our headlamps in and everything. And all of a sudden it gets kind of muddy and we're starting to get kind of close to the good spot. And Rigel is behind me and I hear him say, "Hey, Casey, hold on." I'm like, "What?" Well, then my uncle and everybody else is way ahead of us. And I turn around and Rigel's stuck. Like he's like stuck in the mud. So and he's a big boy. He's a big old boy. I mean,
yeah,
250. I don't know. He's a big old boy. Short too.
How tall? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, he big. Yeah, he not I don't know, about my height, 5'8", 5'9", but about 250 pounds at the time. So I'm like, crap. So he's stuck, and I don't want to let everybody, all the other guys, the cool guys, know that we're screwing up over here. So I'm like, let's get out here. Well, so we start dancing, trying to get him out of the mud. Well, the more he wiggles, the lower he goes, and he's getting more and more stuck. And so finally, I see the headlamps getting way far away, and I'm like, "Hey, hey, Ricky, hold on." So now we're probably like, I don't know, 40 yards apart. And so there's conversation going on in the dark, and I'm like, "Hey, Rigel's stuck," and he's like, "Well, what do you mean stuck?" And I'm like, "Well, like he's stuck." And Ricky's like, "Was he stuck, or like stuck?" And I'm like, "No, he's stuck. So there's this conversation going on back and forth in the dark. And so finally I'm working with Rigel trying to get him out. And then here comes Ricky, and here comes Kyle, here comes Chad. Well, by the time they got to us, they're just laughing at us because we're both kind of sitting there dancing and we're embarrassed. Well, then finally these shitty waiters that Rigel has just completely rip. That's like rip off of the boots. No, he doesn't have any. So we end up, long story long. We end up going back to the truck, getting his boots. He doesn't have any waders. He's on the bank all day. He still gets to shoot some ducks, but he does. And so we finally get set up and everything. And it was like, well, we were trying to fit in and look cool. We did the exact opposite of that. So
Yeah, that's amazing, man. What's funny is I talked to some pretty big waterfowl hunters, and they're like, "Man, there's not that many waterfowl stories you can tell, right? You're just out there, you're shooting ducks." But it's what happens before and after shooting ducks that make for the best waterfowl stories. So I've heard a couple good ones, and that's pretty good. How deep into the mud was he?
I mean, he's a little bit above his knee, not like terrible. It was just like a weird spot. And like I could stand there kind of next to him and keep from getting stuck. I think part of it was he's a big boy, but those waders. So I don't know if you ever been in waders before. So
Yeah. I actually went duck hunting for the first time ever this last season. Killed one duck.
Hey, there you go. Hey, didn't get
Yeah.
skunked.
And I'm with you, man. I was trying to figure out myself. I just was like, well, I'm going to book a spot because in Colorado, you got to do that on public land. And I just ran up and threw some decoys out and pretended like I knew what I was doing and killed one duck and a couple coots.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, like when you get waders in water or mud, they get real tight. So I think what happened was, so he had these huge calves. I mean, huge calves. And so the boots didn't fit real well around his calf because they were, and so he got stuck in the mud. Well, when he tried to lift the boot out, his foot kind of came out of the boot. And so then the pressure like sucked the boot down. And so then he couldn't get his foot back in the boot to like get a grip. Well, so then every time he tried to push it down, his foot into the boot, it was just pushing the boot lower and lower and lower. So like it was, it was only maybe about knee height as far as actual depth, but the wader was like, dang near up to the hip. So that's why I ended up ripping. Was because, well, one, they were cheap too, because shoved so far down in the mud. But oh man, yeah. God, my uncle, that's somebody that I love hearing his hunting stories, man. Gosh, they make me laugh so much. Oh my God. He's good.
You got to introduce us, man. You got to introduce us.
Oh, he's good at telling stories too. He's got a lot of them. Oh man.
That's awesome.
That's one of my favorite things to do growing up was on Thanksgiving, man, is like, it was like a rite of passage, when you're a certain age, you gotta sit over at the kids table, but then you got old enough, you go to the adult table, and then you got to sit there and tell hunting stories. Oh man, I love hearing his stories, man. It's hilarious.
That's awesome, man. I remember actually on Thanksgiving, my grandfather on my mother's side and my uncle would go out and they'd go shooting pheasant and quail and stuff like that in Kansas. I was never old enough. By the time I was only, man, I want to say I was like 7 or 8 years old when my grandfather passed. So I never really got to enjoy that. But I know that every Thanksgiving they went out and went hunting. And at the time, wasn't interested in hunting. Like it was just like whatever. My dad doesn't hunt. So I missed that, but I do recall that, and I wish that it was still going on in my family. So maybe it's a tradition that I need to work forward to in the future.
Yeah, man. I got to go hunting this year on Thanksgiving with my dad. Now we used to have like huge, like it would be Chad and Kyle, my two cousins I'll tell you about, my uncle, my dad, my grandpa, me, and then I mean sometimes like the girls in the family would go too. I think this deer right here I killed on Thanksgiving with my bow. And there was like 8 or 9 of us out on a 70-acre plot, all bow hunting. And it was so cool sharing it with everyone. And like the pictures, you have the whole family there taking pictures with your deer and everything. And
I hate to be the deer that walks onto that 70-yard plot that day with like 9 hunters on it.
Oh yeah, it was. I mean, we were all archery hunting, and so that was the the plot of land that was in Oklahoma City where you could see the city, like the skyline. And so I hunted out there all the time, and some of my cousins would come every now and then, but they didn't know it well enough to just say like, "Hey, go to this tree stand." So I was like my dad was at the fire station this year actually when I killed that one, and I remember that hunt. I ended up walking, I walked like 2 or 3 people to their stand, and then made a loop and walked to my stand so that you know I could I could hunt where in this spot or whatever. And but everybody could. It was 70 acres total, but we were only hunting probably like 40 acres of it. And man, there was a lot of action that day. But yeah, we used to. I remember I called my dad in the tree stand there. I was 18 years old, and he was at the station, and I called him, and I was like, I was shaking. I was like, Dad, I just shot a monster, and he's like, oh my God. He's like, I'll be there in a minute. And before he even hung up the phone, I heard him yelling to everybody at the station. He was like, hot damn, my boy killed a big one. I gotta go. And he hung up. So it should have been about a 45-minute drive for him, but he got there in like 25 minutes, and we waited on him to get there before we tracked him. I knew he didn't go far. I bought that. I just bought a new bow that year. So 28. So I graduated in 2017. I was fortunate. I got a decent amount of cash from graduating high school. So what did I do? I went and bought a brand new bow with it, man. And I got
Yeah.
Matthews DXT, which was like the top of the line at the time. I shot it all the way up to like 3 years ago. I had it for like 10 years, 11 years. Shit, I guess
Wow.
I had it for a long time. But yeah, so I had been shooting my butt off that year. So I was super confident. And by that point, I was able to like stay calm during during shooting and not shoot the posts, stuff like that. But it was the same plot of land too. So
Yeah.
that's crazy. Yeah. Um, yeah, I wasn't planning on telling that story.
That's
That's
how this goes. That's how
yeah,
this goes, man. That's
yeah,
awesome though. Damn, boys, I gotta go. My son's got a big one.
yeah, yeah. He
That's
has.
awesome. Well, what else you got for us, man? I know you got a list. Let's start checking these boxes, marking
All
these
right.
things
Yeah.
off.
What do I got written down here? Oh man. It, how about the first deer I ever killed? So, first deer I ever killed, same plot of land in Oklahoma City that I've been talking about. And so me and my dad, and then my dad's good friend Ted were all hunting. And this is before. See here, this is before I had a cell phone. So this is whenever you would, you say, all right, hey, we're gonna meet back at the truck at this time or whatever. Or
Yeah.
yeah, you didn't have you didn't talk to each other. We didn't have
Yeah.
walk or anything like that. So
No Onyx, no nothing.
no, I mean, you didn't need it. I'm hunting 60.
Yeah.
So we're gonna get down at like 10 o'clock or something like that. I can't remember the time, but like right before we're getting down, I look out and I see this little buck. It was a little forked horn. Actually, I have the antlers right behind me. Little forked horn on one side. We called it the unibuck. It had 2 on one, and then it just broke off right at the base. And he's like 50 yards and 60 yards, and then he gets all the way up to 20 yards. Come to full draw. First time I ever connected with my bow. I shoot and I hit him right in the spine. So I hit him in the spine, drop him, and he's sitting there, doing this thing,
Just trying. Yeah.
trying. And I'm like, oh crap. So I get out another arrow, and I'm still only pulling like maybe 50 pounds at this point. Like I was a little guy. I mean, it was ninth grade by this point, but I maybe weighed 100 pounds. So I'm pulling like 45, 50 pounds. So I'm not as nervous now. And this is back whenever you shot aluminum arrows. So, that arrow's done. That arrow's, that's like a $12 arrow. It's ruined. Well, I don't care. I'm killing this deer. So I load another one, try to stay calm. I shoot, wham, I hit it right in the shoulder blade. Doesn't do hardly anything. Just like, well, by this point, we were supposed to get down at like 10 o'clock. And so my dad, I look across the field and I see my dad over there, and he sees that I've shot. And it's not like I used to always take a practice shot before I got down. He can tell, like, just by the way my mannerisms are and everything, that like that wasn't a practice shot. Well, my dad, he doesn't run. He never runs. And I see him take off running across the field. He's like, I don't know, he's a couple hundred yards away, and he's running towards me. And then my dad's other friend Ted, by this point, he's coming back, and he's got to walk by me to go to the truck. So he's coming same time. And he sees me and he hunkers down. And I see my dad running, and I see Ted like hunkering down because he's like, something's going on. And so I grab a third arrow, and I shoot it, and I made a good shot. Well, by this point, my dad's only like 80 yards away, and he's still running, and he just runs up. And He is just hot, just freaking fist pumping in the air, and it's so excited and everything. And he's like, "You want to shoot it again?" He's like, he's making fun of me now. He's just joking. He's like, "You got any more arrows left? You want to shoot it again?" And so, but I get down and we just sit there and laugh and have a good time. And just I don't know how in the world he happened to actually get to see the whole thing transpire. But yeah, it was a little bitty fork and horn we called unibuck, and I was so proud to kill that thing, man.
That's awesome.
3 shots.
I decided in the middle of that story that not only do we need your uncle, I think we need your uncle and your dad on the same episode, because I have a feeling those guys would be a lot of fun.
Oh, I would love that. Oh my gosh. Especially in like 30 years, man. I would love to go back and listen to those stories.
Yeah, man. It's funny. That's actually something that comes up a lot. Is everybody goes, "God, you got to get my old man on here. I'd love to just have his stories recorded, if nothing else." But that's it, man. Dads do the best stories because they're all only half true, right?
Exactly. Problem is I'm trying to tattle on myself as much as I can so that he can't tattle on me too much. But man,
he tells that story and you were 9 arrows in before he showed up.
yeah. And it was 5 yards away or something, yeah.
That's good, man. That's good. What else you got? It's always funny transitioning from one story to another, but that's good. Yeah. What else you got?
Yeah. So non deer hunting story, another duck hunting story. So a lot of my friends in high school, we were like friends because of like certain, I guess it's like most things, because of certain social groups. And so I went to a big high school, and I played football, and I pole vaulted, and so I had my jock friends that we played football together or whatever, and lifted weights, stuff like that. And then I had my hunting friends, and I was about the only one that transferred back and forth between like the rednecks and like the the jocks, right? So
Yeah.
so it's very different group. But there was one guy that he kind of he was getting into hunting. He was like a year or two younger than me. He was getting into hunting. And then I had my hunting buddy that didn't play sports. And so my hunting buddy that didn't play sports, we'd go out to his land every now and then, and we'd go duck hunting. And man, so we get up, and I don't know what time we left, 3 o'clock in the morning or something, to drive out to Holdenville. And we're duck hunting, and on the way there, I'm like, "Man, guys, I don't know. I don't feel good. I'm just I feel like crap." And of course, I was the only one of the three of us that could call at all. Like the other two can't call worth crap. So it was like, well, Casey, and I was the one that had all the decoys. So they needed me to come along anyway. But I don't care if I don't feel good. I'm going to go hunting, especially in high school. So we get out there, and I'm like, dude, man. And I realize I'm about to shit my pants is what's going on. And I'm like, guys, I got to go drop one. So I go out in the middle of this field, and before I even realize it, I'm out there, and oh my God, it's so bad. And then I realize I don't have any toilet paper. And so I think every good hunter has a good story or at least not a good story, but has a shirt that's missing a sleeve. And I definitely have one of those. But those guys sat there, and oh my God, it's so cold outside. And those guys, after I'm out there for, a minute or so, they realize what's going on. And they freaking turn the truck, pointed right towards me, get the spotlights on me and everything.
Those are good friends. That's what the friends are supposed to do.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. And so I ended up, oh man, it helped some, but I didn't feel that good. I ended up sitting in the blind that day. I called, and I didn't even take my gun. I let them do all the work and all the hunting. But yeah, that was the only time I think I've ever had to cut my sleeve off. But
that's pretty funny, man. That's pretty funny. It reminds me, he's actually gonna be the next episode after you. Was it Guy Deplanche of Western Contours? All I know is I follow him on Instagram, and he had a whole thing about like having to go, and then next thing you know, he's wearing shorts on his left leg. so everybody seems to come to the same conclusion. It just kind of depends on which limb they're willing to sacrifice.
Well, I don't know about you. Like, what's if you were to go buy a new truck tomorrow, what's the first thing you do when you get home?
Oh, I have no idea. Buy a truck tomorrow? Like after I bought the truck?
After you got the truck, you get it home. What's the first thing you do?
Man, I got no idea. I mean,
I have no idea. Toilet paper in your truck. That's number one rule.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I do have a roll of toilet paper in my truck, but I don't know if that's the first thing I'd put in there. But yeah.
Yeah.
No, that adds up.
My yeah, and I wasn't in my truck that day. I was in my buddy's. So, but I don't know if they may have taken it. He may have had some in there. He was just holding back probably. So
Yeah, man, that reminds me. So hunting this year, man, I got out in November after my back injury for a little bit, and you bring wet wipes with you until the temperature doesn't get above 20 degrees, and then all of a sudden that's a really bad idea, right?
yeah. Oh man. So I told you my first deer hunting story. That was like kind of embarrassing, but nonetheless, I killed one. So I'm proud of it. But my first turkey. So I was 7th grade. Ironically enough, I was in a town called Holdenville, which is the same town that my buddy in high school, where we go hunting with the duck hunting and stuff sometimes. So we my dad gets permission from a coworker that owns the land, like he always does. So we go down there and we're turkey hunting, and I was, like I said, I was a little guy. I mean, hell, I'm still a little guy, but I was really little at the time. So we start off on this kind of like for Oklahoma is a cliff. For here, it's just like nothing. But in Oklahoma, it's kind of a ridge or a cliff or whatever. So we start up there, kind of looking over these hay fields, and we see some turkey down there. Well, they're not going to come to us how far away they are. So we're like, screw it, let's freaking go for it. Well, I'm all about it. Like I'm seventh grade. I'm ready to freaking tackle whatever comes out. So we bail off this cliff and go down and get to the edge of the wheat field and everything. And well, the wheat was like, I don't know, it was maybe like a foot and a half tall or so. And so my dad, we're in this fence row now, and there's a cedar tree here, and my dad's, and the turkeys are, I don't know, 150 yards away. And so my dad's like trying to get them to come in. He's really good at calling turkeys. So
do you use like a slate call or like a mouth call, or how's he go about that?
Call, and he gets in, and he does all. He's never done competitions, but you'd think he's done like competitions. He gets into it. Gets a little strut going himself, and
starts dragging his arms in the dirt.
Yeah. He gets into it. So my dad's like, "Well, hey, go crawl at him. What's worse going to happen? You're gonna scare him off. See if you can crawl to him." I'm like, "All right." So I've got this little that guy Ted that was actually there 2 years later when I killed that deer. He was with us, or he had given me a 20 gauge shotgun. So I'm crawling across the wheat field with my little 20 gauge, and my dad's behind me in the tree row, and he's calling, and I'm trying to stay low. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And so my dad, he would, he'd be calling, and he'd go like left, and he would like yell it, and then so telling me to go left, and then he'd right, right. And so I can't hardly hear him, but I'm like, and so I kind of like turn around, and my dad's like, he points whatever direction it was, and so I kind of like look forward, and there's this Tom like running at me. I think Tom thought that I was a hen because I was,
going through the grass. Yeah.
And all of a sudden I'm like, oh shit. So I lay down, I get my gun situated, and then I pop back up, and he's like maybe 20 yards. And so I shoot him, and he rolls up or whatever. And I get up, and I'm like pumped up, but I'm like, I don't know if I run towards I don't know, do I run towards my dad or do I run towards the turkey? Well, here comes my dad running just like he did. He's running towards me and super excited. And man, you'd have thought that we just killed like, I don't know, some trophy like Tom. My dad was so excited. Hell, I was excited too. Put that thing over my shoulder. I'm a little bitty shit. So it's dang near like hitting the ground. And we walk back to camp, and oh man, I got pictures of me, and we with my shotgun, and my turkey. Man, you would have thought that I just freaking hung the moon, because I was like, I was the man that day. And there's still those pictures still get pulled out every now and then, and it's just pretty cool. We stayed in this. My dad had this little bitty camper. I mean, little bitty teardrop camper, and he just left it out there on that land, and he called it the Chateau of Love. Just this little bitty freaking camper. And so there's pictures, and that the turkey's there, and then the chateau is behind it and everything. And oh man, those are some good memories right there.
That's pretty awesome. And actually, I got another story for you. I don't think I've told this one on the podcast before, but my first turkey, and this is like I mean, we're talking 5 years ago. So like not very long ago. But I'd never turkey hunted. And so I literally go on Facebook and I'm like, I'm looking for a turkey mentor. Anybody want to help me out? And this guy, he just sends me a message. He's like, man, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And I couldn't be more happy that this guy reaches out to me. We still talk occasionally, and hopefully I can actually get him on the podcast because he is a red-blooded American hunter. Like he just does it all, right? But this guy, he lives in Rifle, Colorado. I'm here more towards Boulder, Denver. So 4 hours apart. Like we don't live anywhere near each other, but he comes down for whatever reason to the area. And I'm like, let me buy you dinner. Let me pick your brain on turkey hunting. And we meet up, and long story short, eventually he invites me to come out and hunt with him this season. So I'm like, all right, let's go. So I drive out and stay with this guy that I've met one time. So my wife's like, are you sure this is a good idea? And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I think this is a good idea. And it was a great idea. I will say it was the most uncomfortable bed I've ever slept on. It was like a futon that had completely collapsed. So it's like all these like boards and stuff. But we hunted for that turkey as hard as I've ever gone on any elk hunt. Like we were going for it. So we're driving around. We're going crazy. We're putting in 10 miles on our boots, and we're driving around. We're up in the morning, just going. And it's the last day. He gives me 3 days. I have 3 days. And we've had a couple opportunities, but nothing really panned out. It comes down to it, and we find 2 toms and 2 hens, and they're just having a good old party. So we set up some decoys, and we're trying to call them in. Nothing. Can't get them to budge. And I was like, every single time, and this is what reminded me of my story with yours, is every time I'm like, should I like crawl? Should I just like get down and crawl into these turkeys? And he's like, no, I don't think that's necessary. And so this is our last hunt. He knows I'm leaving later in the day. So he's like, you better start crawling. So I'm like, all right. So I get down, and, I've got my shotgun with me. And so I'm crawling, and out there in Rifle, like I'm just crawling through elk crap. I'm crawling through mule deer crap. I'm just crawling through all this stuff. And I crawl like 40, 50 yards, and I hear him just he's using a mouth call. So I just hear him, clucking behind me, and I'm like, all right, this is going to work. And I get to this point where all of a sudden there's like 15 feet of barbed wire fence. And I'm like, what the hell? But it's like down. So I'm like, what am I supposed to do here? So I'm like trying to crawl over barbed wire that's just downed on the ground. And I'm getting through it. And then next thing I know is I get to them, and they just book it. And I'm like, oh shit. So I'd probably crawled 80 to 90 yards to just like sagebrush and gross, nasty. It's just super uncomfortable. I was like, whatever, it's my last opportunity. I just got to keep pushing. And they start going. So they're moving faster than I can crawl. So I get up, and so now at this point, I'm kind of like just as crouched as low as I can. And I'm a bigger guy, so I'm not really crouched all that low, but I'm trying to keep up with these birds, and they're just cruising down this ridge before it drops down into a bunch of brush, and I would lose them forever. But they're cruising right on the top of the ridge, and I can see them. So I'm going. We go maybe 150 to 200 yards, and all of a sudden they spot me, and they just take off and they start flying away. And I stand up, and I'm like, damn it, that was so much work. I was probably crawling for an hour, and I'm like, well, I got to pee. So I just whip it out and I start going. And next thing I know is I realized that one of them didn't see me. So I'm sitting there literally peeing, standing straight up in the middle of this sagebrush, which, sagebrush is 1.5 feet tall. So I'm exposed. And it's also a burn. So any trees that are there have nothing on them. So I'm literally like, just trying to finish up and like get back into cover. So I get down, and I have a little slate call because I can't mouth call for shit. So I get my slate call out, and he's gone at this point, but I making my little calls. And the other 3 birds, they fire up. And that's when he's like, oh man, what the hell is going on? You see his head go up, and he's like, I thought those guys were right with me. So he turns around, and now he's coming right back at me. So I just set up, and I don't know how far, 30 yards maybe, but like literally, I don't even think my zipper's closed, but I'm sitting on this burned up log, and boom. And I drop this bird, and I go back, and I'm like trying to find my buddy. I'm like, what do I do? It turns out he saw them, and he had gotten ahead of them. And so like they were going to die no matter what, because he was just sitting behind a brush, maybe 70 more yards of them cruising that direction. He was right there. But I spooked up all of them, took a pee, and then killed my first turkey.
That's awesome.
Yeah, man. I've said it on the podcast before. Like, I just seem to have luck with turkey. I can't seem to kill anything else, but turkeys, even with my pecker in my hand, I still seem to have success. So, and I think I've killed a turkey every season since.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I haven't killed turkey in a while. Man, that's fun. I always say I'd rather be lucky than good any day,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I cannot tell you how stupid I felt when I was peeing and looking at the bird like standing there, and I'm like, oh God, I gave up too early.
I feel like a lot of hunters go through that phase. I know I still
Yeah.
do that for sure. So
Yeah, yeah. I've had some other stupid mistakes like that, but they didn't pan out as well. That's the only one that ever seemed to work for me. So,
yeah.
all right, man. Casey, you got any more for us, or do you want to call it? I know I've taken up a fair amount of your time, man. So it's up to you. I'll go as late as we need.
Man, I think I've got some good ones out, and it's been fun talking about them and telling them, and reminiscing a little bit. And you definitely should. I if you could have my dad and or uncle on, that would be they. My uncle's got some funny stories, man. So,
Well, talk to him, man. We're coming up here on the Christmas holidays. I don't know if you're going home or going to see him for the holidays, but mention it to him because I would be happy. Like that's the exact kind of person that I want to have on the podcast. Is just like good old boy, got great stories. Like whether it's hunting with their son or their brother or whoever it may be. So that's the exact kind of person we're looking for.
awesome, man. Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having me on, Michael. Appreciate it.
Dude, my pleasure. My pleasure. I'm glad we made it happen. At this point, typically we tell the people where they can find you. Maybe share your Instagram, and then you also have a podcast. So why don't we tell people a little bit about that as well? Because what you're doing is really cool.
Yeah, so I have a podcast called Angry Ginger Podcast. It's right now it's just on YouTube, but nonetheless, we have people tell their stories associated with mental health. So whether it's been whatever kind of struggles they've gone through, so they tell their story, and I think it's everybody can kind of relate to at least some part of everyone's story, especially their struggles. And on one hand, it can be very inspiring to notice that you can, even in the darkest of times, hopefully come out on the other side. And also just know that you're not alone whenever you're going through rough times, but also that everybody is more than what has happened to them. So we highlight the person and not necessarily like what all they're going through, what they have gone through, and make it realize that you're not alone whenever you go through stuff, and everybody's going through stuff. So kind of remember that whenever you deal with anything out in real life, is that everybody has a battle that they're going through that you know nothing about. So try to respect that. But yeah, so the Angry Ginger Podcast right now, it's only on YouTube, and then my Instagram, I think it's Casey Mac 1014. There's an underscore in there somewhere, but yeah, you
Yeah.
can find.
Yeah, and I'll also throw it out there that Coda Iron View in Boulder County, Colorado. If you go ever out here in Boulder County, stop by. Best gym I've ever been to, without a doubt. So, yeah, Casey, that's it, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on, dude.
All right, man. Appreciate you, Michael.
All right, guys, that's it. A couple more stories in the books. I want to thank Casey, of course, for jumping on the podcast, man. I really do appreciate it. I appreciate your support and, of course, your stories. I thought it was fun, especially how your kind of Oklahoma draw kind of started filling in there. He doesn't always talk like that, but when he goes back to his roots and starts thinking about these stories of him as a child, you can definitely hear it, and I thought that was pretty cool. Beyond that, I'm going to go ahead and put links to his YouTube podcast and his Instagram, as well as his gym, in the show notes. So go there, check out Coda, check out the Angry Ginger and everything that Casey does. He's an awesome individual. And then beyond that, guys, I just want to say, Casey, thank you so much for coming on. I really do appreciate it. And then to the listeners, thank you guys, of course, as always, for tuning in. I really do appreciate that. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, don't forget to share the podcast with at least one person today. Other than that, if you have some stories, don't forget to reach out. You can connect with us on Instagram at huntingstories_official. And there'll be a link to that in the show notes as well. But that's it, guys. Thanks again. I appreciate all of you. And, as always now, get out there and make some stories of your own. Thank you.